My name is David Quattlebaum. I'm a partner at MedProcure. We're the original designers and makers of PO Advantage procurement system for HPS. Today, we're going to do a quick run through of the software and kind of give you a flavor for how it operates and some of the options that are available in it. As we go through the process, if you don't mind, if you have a question, either put a question in the chat or there's a little Q&A button up at the top of your screen. If you could click on that and just keep track of your questions. We'll have plenty of time at the end for questions. I'm going to kind of give us probably a 30 to 35 minute kind of overview of how PO Advantage works and what its possibilities are, and then we'll open up the floor for everybody to ask their questions, and then we'll review the ones that are in the chats as well. If you are one of those folks that don't really want to talk in a group, that's perfectly okay. Just leave your question there. We'll make sure that we answer all the questions that are in the chat as well as those who are asking questions verbally at the end. So I'm going to get started, and excuse me, I've been on a bunch of calls this morning already, so I'm going to have a sip of water before we get started here. Excuse me, and then I'll go ahead and share my screen, and we can take a look at the application. So just a little bit of background for the application first before we get started. The very first version of PO Advantage was a product that our company wrote back in 2007. So even though it's relatively new to the HPS community, the last year or so, year and a half, it has been in the field for a long time. So we've been implementing with lots of senior living locations. We got our start back in 2002 in senior living, writing charge tracking systems. And since then, we have expanded out the solution to be able to be a full procurement platform, including inventory management, charge tracking, transfers, internal transfers, requisitions, all of those types of things that you would expect from a procurement platform. So over the years, we've added, it's about 1,500 users, I think, now on the platform. And as I mentioned, been around for a long time now. Our goal with PO Advantage is to help you with procurement and provide a solution that will allow you to do all of your purchasing through the system. And what I mean by that is any POs that you would normally have inside of your organization, we'll encourage you to have us help you onboard vendors and have as close to 100% of spend flowing through PO Advantage as possible. And I think you'll see the benefits of doing that as we go along here in our demonstration today. I'm going to start at the middle section of the first homepage when you first log in. You'll notice that we have sort of a transaction workflow widget here in the middle. And I've got it broken down. I'm kind of a super user. So we'll talk about the order transaction flow today. We'll also talk about invoice approvals, although keep in mind that those are two different roles inside of our system. I happen to have it assigned to myself so that we can see the entire transaction flow all the way through to invoice approvals. But it's very common inside of our implementation plans to have different users doing those different functions. So just keep that in mind as we go along today. We're going to keep track of orders at the very beginning when an order first begins. It'll be in the in-progress status. We know that sometimes you're building large orders and you need to be able to keep track of those as you're going. So those fall into this first bucket. Then waiting to be approved, we have a whole series of rules that are available inside of the system to be able to configure. We'll probably take a quick look at that and how the rules engine works. It can be extremely granular, but because of that approval rules component that we have there, we have a bucket for those orders that are waiting to be approved by an authorized user. Then once we have those orders in, we send those out electronically. So we have connections with most of the national vendors, but certainly a very tight integration with Gordon Foods and with McKesson, the two prime vendors in HPS's portfolio. And so we send those out electronically, and we get a confirmation back on those, typically within 30 minutes or so. And that confirmation will inform the system about potential back orders or items that need to have an item replacement or a price change. Any of those components will automatically come across on the confirmation. Then, of course, because we're managing inventory inside the system, which is, by the way, an option, but it gives you kind of an idea. The receiver is an important component. Some people like that just for the three-way match also, but it certainly does allow the system to increase the inventory in the inventory module when something is received. And again, we'll walk through each one of these steps. Then, of course, we're waiting for the electronic invoice to come through. Any of those items that hit the confirmation that are going to be back ordered, they end up in a back order bucket so that we can take action. So that's kind of the order transaction flow. We also have a series of actions that can be taken on invoice approvals. If you go through the entire top section of ordering and there are no real changes there, in other words, it was shipped in full, the price didn't change, all those kind of things, the invoice will drop immediately in the ready to pay bucket. And so that means that there are no changes that occurred on it, so we could expect it to be paid based on the outbound order. If there are any other components that have changed, it'll either go in a waiting for approval bucket or a reviewing status. And again, we'll walk through all of these stages. And then, of course, you can dispute an invoice with a vendor, and we manage the workflow of that inside the system. So what I want to do now is just kind of get started and dig in. Inside of the system, you can generate a purchase order in multiple different ways. We have a mobile app that is available that you can generate the purchase order by either scanning with your camera's phone or inputting data into that mobile app. We also have a little fob scanner, and I apologize, I don't have one with me today, but it's a small keychain size barcode scanner that allows you to either scan the product's barcode or a shelf label to be able to build a purchase order from that perspective. We also allow for cycle counts with that little fob scanner, and you can use the same scanner to charge out. So let's just start with a basic order, kind of walk you through how we think about creating an order. In this situation, I'm going to just type in an item to search for it. We are really a formulary-based system, meaning we have your item masters and your purchase history preloaded as part of our onboarding process. And those items are already loaded inside of the system and easy to use and find and use. We also give you the ability to search a distributor's catalog, and we'll talk about that in just a second. So let's go in here. We'll just type in a syringe. Now, I'll add a couple of items here. We'll do some briefs as well. I think most of the people on the call are senior living, but just understand that I have a bunch of senior living items on here. So please forgive me if these items don't really match up with what you're thinking. So you can see here, I've got 3 different items that are added to this purchase order, and a couple of things to note about this. First of all, the GL codes are already assigned to these SKUs. So we're doing a GL code breakdown as we go along. You can see, for example, that both of the line items for the briefs are under the same GL code. So those are being bolted together here. You'll notice up at the top too, we've created a tab for McKesson. And you can see that all of the items that are here are on that McKesson tab. We have sort of a unified purchase order approach here, and that allows us to do all of the vendors' orders on a single tab while breaking those out for the electronic delivery of those. So, for example, if I wanted to order some ketchup, I can add that to my purchase order as well, and I get a brand new tab up here for Gordon Foods. Okay. You can see here, we did not assign a GL code to that one, so you can take some action on that and generate it. If all of that looks good, all you have to do is click on the approve and send here. And notice I've got an alert that's generated. This is coming from my order rules. this says that my Gordon Food Service minimum shipping is $300. And by the way, these are made up rules, so they're not necessarily applying to your specific business case. But you can see I've got them broken down, and we're going to be sending those orders to each of the vendors individually, even though we're taking single action on an individual purchase order. So I'll just go ahead and click on approve all here. And you can see that this immediately takes us through the process. Now, one of these orders, you can see that one of these orders goes all the way through to waiting to be received, while one of them we're waiting on the confirmation. And again, this is really dependent on the response from the vendor, and it typically is in the anywhere from 5 minutes to 30-minute range to be able to get the confirmations. Most of the time, you're not going to have to take any action at all in this stage. This is going to all happen electronically. I've got confirmation turned on just so that I can show you what that looks like. But if you happen to have a small vendor that you need to do, you get an email confirmation, but you want to be able to track it all the way through the system anyway, we certainly allow that here. And you can either put in a manual carrier and tracking number, or you can update the confirmation quantity or cost. But once that's confirmed here, that automatically drops down into the waiting to be received bucket. Okay. And again, if there's two things that are happening on the receiver, you're either telling the system what the quantity is and how many you're trying to receive for doing a three-way match on the invoice, or if you're doing inventory, it's also increasing your inventory as you receive it. So we'll go through a receive real quick here. And notice this is the one that I just now passed through confirmation. There's a couple of things I want to point out at this stage. One of them is that you can keep internal notes here. And so if you have a specific thing that you need to note as a part of the confirmation or as a part of the receiving, you can add that internal note, and that internal note will track all the way through to the accounts payable system. So it stays with what we call our match packet. In other words, we bind up the order, the confirmation, receiver, and the invoices together into a match packet. And any of those external notes or internal notes come all the way through on that packet as well, so that as it gets to accounts payable, all of that has visibility as well. You'll also notice that we have a little upload section here. This allows us to upload a PDF. Excuse me. Get another sip of water. This allows us to upload a packing slip in the form of a PDF. We also have that integrated into our mobile app. So if you wanted just to take a picture of your packing slip and bind it up to your receiver, you can also do that on the mobile app. But for now, I'll just click on receive order here. And you'll notice after it's been received in full, it's just moving down into the waiting to be invoiced bucket. Let me show you one. Let me see if I can grab one of these that has multiple items on here. What we're going to do here is I want to show you just a couple of different things related to the receiving. So for example, let's say that I only received 2 of these, even though my confirmation had 4. So you can see my quantity order here was originally 4. My confirmation came in at 4, and my pending quantity starts out as 4 here. But let's just say that I received only 2 of those 4. When I click on the receive order button, something very unique happens. It drops into this little yellow bucket. And what that tells me is that that order is partially received and that I need to take a look at it again. So if I click on the receive button again, notice these top 2 lines are closed out now. Those are completed lines. This bottom one, originally we had a confirmation of quantity of 4. We now have a pending quantity of 2 because we only received partial receiver on those. And then you can see the prior receiver down below. Okay, so we're going to track all of those all the way through the system. I'm going to go ahead and click on receive right here. And that moves that one also in the waiting to be invoice bucket. Okay. So let's move. I'm going to move on down the line here as we go into the waiting to be invoiced. I just want to give you kind of an idea of what this looks like. Again, most of these are going to have a electronic component. So particularly with McKesson and Gordon's, we're getting in those electronically, so you would not have to take manual action on this. But I want to show you kind of what this looks like if you had a small vendor, again, that you were trying to do some manual invoicing with. You could upload that invoice over here on the right-hand side, and you can configure this to do side by side as well, so that you can key in or make changes as you go along. In this particular situation, we're taking that original confirmation and we're flipping it over to the invoice quantities and prices, with an expectation that in most of the cases, that's going to be all you need to do. If you needed to add any kind of tax, or you needed to add an individual line, maybe an additional item was shipped that you called in or something like that, or added addenda like freight charges and those kind of things, all of those are available for editing a manual invoice. We have a lot of people that ask, hey, can you OCR invoices that come in and that kind of stuff? And you can, but the reality is that it's almost faster to be able to do these types of things, because most of the time you would have to do a verification on those if you were doing it in OCR. It's just the success rate just hadn't been great on that in the past. So we make it really easy to be able to input an invoice and create it. Once it's created here, it's going to automatically, if I've got the authority to approve invoices, it's going to automatically forward me to that approval screen. You'll see that come up here real quick. Yeah, so you can see here, this is the invoice that I manually created. It's got all 3 of my lines on it. And this is sort of a preview of it. It also has any notes about the actual approval process and how it went through. But over here on the right-hand side, and this is just that waiting for approval bucket down in the invoice section, you could take actions here. So you could, for example, say that one's ready to pay and go ahead and send it over to accounts payable. You could send it for a review, and we can automatically connect that to the original order creation user. That's what happens here. Or you can add a recipient on the fly to put that into a review status. Let's just put it onto this one and say, hey, I think the pricing is incorrect on this item, whatever it is. And then that puts that into a review queue. And notice it's not in this user, it's in that primary user that sent the order. And I've got that unbound here so that it goes to that different bucket, but it automatically forwards that through. Any of the ones that are ready to pay, they just show up here at the bottom. We click on ready to pay. We can take a look at those internal notes if there were any, or we can add additional ones. We can also dispute that particular invoice. So if you wanted to send that to your sales rep, for example, and ask a question about pricing, you can automatically do that. And then it puts that into this little disputed bucket down at the bottom. Once that dispute is ready to go, you can do a ready to pay. And if for some reason you had some dispute that resulted in you putting in a different number, in other words, maybe you're going to short pay this based off of your conversation, you can do that here. And all of that information will end up in what we call our payment packet. So I'm going to show you that one real quick and show you what it looks like. So you can see this is a match summary for this particular transaction, and it has the original order, the confirmation, the receiving. You can see that this came through in 2 different receipts. The receiving total, the receiving invoice, and then the created by, received by, and approved by users. And if we scroll down, there's copies of each one of those. Our goal as we're doing this is to be able to bundle all of that information up. And you can see there's the 2 different receivers that we have on this particular one. And here's our invoice. So our goal here is really to be able to send that over with the accounts payable general ledger entries. So we are integrated with multiple systems to be able to do that. And this gives us the capability to be able to send an attachment that shows all of the evidence for the approval process. Now, one of the things that I kind of skipped over here was this back ordered items section. And I want to take you through this a little bit. So for example, the confirmation on a particular item, maybe it was marked as 0 and had a back-ordered status. That brings us automatically into the back-ordered items bucket, and it allows us to take action here. So if we had a functional equivalent cross-reference already loaded, and we can take a look at that here in just a second on the item master. But if we had a functional equivalent cross-reference already built out for this, we could take action and say, hey, I want to create an order for that functional equivalent. Okay. You could create a new order and just search for a replacement item, or you could hide it from a list. And what that means is, hey, I got a notification that it's a 2-week back order. So take it out of my back order notification bucket until it actually arrives. And so that gives us sort of a way of queuing up reminders about checking those back orders. And I'll show you that one. Or you could close that line. Maybe you just called in and said, hey, I need to have this item immediately. You know, it'll come back in on the invoice, by the way. So you'll see that on the invoice anyway. But you can actually close the line on the back order queue in that way. But let's just say that we wanted to hide this from the list and we got notification that it'll be in 2 weeks, and that's okay with us. You can just set up that 2-week timeline, and then when you submit it, it basically removes that out of the back ordered items list. In 2 weeks from today, it'll pop back up there in your back ordered items automatically, so that it lets you know, hey, it's time to review that, check in with your vendor, and those kind of things. So we're trying to help you with the workflow from the order perspective, but also we know that there's some order management stuff on the back orders and those kind of things that we need to be able to look at. And that was particularly noticeable during COVID, as I'm sure you all know. Okay, so that's the full walkthrough on our transactions. I will point out just a couple of other methodologies for creating an order. We have a quick orders screen. I had mentioned the ability to do that with those scans on the labels with the fob scanner, but this is a sort of it's a little bit of an old school way of doing this. I can select a distributor. Let's say that I'm doing a McKesson order, and it's going to show me my entire formulary and give me the capability of just keying in values down the list. Now you might say, well, I don't want to see all of my items. You know, it's kind of crazy to do that. I understand. So one of the ways that you can manage that is you can set up, you can see these stars over here on the left-hand side. If you click on these, we can set up a series of these items as our favorites, okay? And as we go to this favorites template, it'll go ahead and filter out all of the other items and only leave my favorites in the queue for being able to generate that order. And of course, you can build any other kind of template here as well. You can do that on that main order screen. You can save any order as a template. And so that'll give you the ability to have a shortcut to very rapidly key in items. One of the other things that I didn't point out before is that we do support images. So you can click on any of these with the camera and it'll show you the images from the vendor's website that are associated with those particular products. If I wanted to put in just a couple of quantities here, I'll just kind of show you. It's building the order over here on the right-hand side. And if we review it, it's basically taking us back to that same screen, right? So our final decision point is still built around that purchase order. Now, let's say that we get to this point and we say, hey, I need something that's not on my formulary. I need to shop for something, if you will. We do have that punch out that I mentioned. And what that does is it allows the vendor catalog to be accessible directly from our purchase order system. So let's just say, for example, that I was going to search for a syringe here. By the way, I'm not a product expert, but I always know I'm going to find syringes in a med search. So that's one of the reasons I always do that. But let's just say that I'm going to randomly pick one of these items. And let's just say that I'm going to put in 2 of these. I'm going to add it to my cart. And then once that cart is built, I have the ability to go through the checkout process and bring that back to PO Advantage. So I'm going to go to my cart here. And I'm going to click on my punch out. Oh, I did not have my, I picked an item that required authority to do that. So I actually have to delete this one. I'm sorry. Let's do briefs. I know I won't need a license for briefs. As I said, I'm not a product expert. Okay, let's just do one of these cases here. Let's add that one. There we go. And this one says it's in stock. So I'll click on punch out. And then when I submit it, that brings me back into PO Advantage, and it brings that item into my purchase order automatically. So when I send this, it's going to bind it up with those other 3 items that I was already ordering, and it will then be available to purchase. Okay, so that's a couple of other methodologies for being able to generate a purchase order. And I like to cover those because we try to think through different ways that facilities are generating orders, and we want to kind of accommodate that process. So that's kind of what we were doing there. Now let's flip over real quickly and look at the item master. I want to kind of point out the ability to control what you're buying and what the decision-making process is for an item master. So you can see here I've got 2 different vendors set up. I could look at the master formulary for all of those together if you wanted to, or you can isolate those down by vendor. So I'm going to click on the formulary section here, and you'll notice that this takes me to the item details for each of the items that are on my formulary or buying guide, if you will. And if I click on the edit button, it'll show you what's available here. I have minimums and maximums by different locations inside of my facility. So if I'm doing inventory, I have the capability to be able to monitor and manage that. Under the items section, I have a number of different things here. You can, if you're dispensing this and you need a unit of measure conversion, that's available here. We can categorize these items inside the system, and those can be your own categories if you prefer. As I mentioned, the GL code capability is there as well, so you can bind those to GL code. If you're doing charge tracking inside of your facility, you can also put in a charge code under this code section, and that will allow us to export those ancillary charges to a billing system, point-click care, matrix. We have, I think, 25 different export formats in the senior living space. And then, of course, we've got, lots of other NDC numbers if it's a medication, that image URL. And then one of the important parts, I don't have a lot of these connected here on my test account, of course, but we'll have the automatic connections to your GPO and your contract number associated with each item. And that will allow us to be able to monitor the contracted spend and whether or not there's other opportunities for contracted items when you're buying an off-contract item. And all of that happens automatically behind the scenes. Let me see if I've got real quick. I think I've got just an example to show you what that looks like. Well, 1 second. I'll show you one of these Gordon. I think I've got a Gordon Foods item just set up. Yeah. So I've just got a generic item here just set up on a contract to show you what that looks like. So any of those items that are on contract, when it's connected to HPS CAT, which is kind of what's happening behind the scenes, those contracts will get connected automatically in your item master. And that's visible all the way through the purchase order, all the way through to the item master, as I mentioned. Okay, let's talk a little bit about charges, just to kind of give you a concept of how this works. So I mentioned that little fob scanner. A lot of people are used to that historically inside of charge tracking systems to be able to use a little barcode scanner, go around scanning, and then come back and synchronize. We support that methodology. We also have iPad and Android tablet app, as well as an on-screen touch screen mode. And what that does is it gives us the ability to very rapidly charge out items based on the charge out history of a particular resident or the charge out history of a particular account. So you can do generic charge accounts like, house account, first floor, second floor, or we can do that by individual resident. So I'm going to just click on this button to show you one of these resident charges. Notice I have no history here, So what I'm going to do is I'm going to search for a product. We'll go to syringe again and select that. We'll try a couple of different ones here just to kind of show you what this looks like. And you can see here, I don't have a quantity on hand for this particular item, so it's kind of giving me a notification that I need to take a look at the quantity on hands for that particular item, but it's still going to let me charge these out. And notice I can just click on the button again to increment the quantity. And then when I charge that out, it'll loop right back around to that resident again. And when I go back to that resident, it's going to remember that in the past, I've charged those items out. And then all I have to do is tap once or multiple times for quantities to be able to charge that item out. Okay. We get a lot of questions about lot numbers and expiration dates on medications and serialized items and those kind of things. We do support that. And when you tap on those items, it will ask you which lot number you're decrementing from or which one you've actually pulled when that occurs. We also support recurring charges. I don't think I have any set up here right now. No, but we also support setting up a date charge. Let me just show you real quickly how that happens. This is in just the manual input mode. A lot of the times people will use this screen because they like to see the history of the charges as they were putting them in. This is pretty fast to key in. We also allow for a gun scanner as well as the synchronization of the fob scanner on this screen as well. But let's just say that I'm going to do this by resident. And I'll choose Andy Warhol. By the way, I use famous artists because I have an arts background. So, and then we can choose any of these items here in the list, or you can search for an item. And this will allow you to generate the charge immediately, or you can schedule that charge. So let's just say that you've got an incontinence resident that you're going to give X number of bags per week to, or X number of bags per day, whatever it is, and you can schedule those out so that it's automatically generating those charges for you as you go. But you can schedule that start date. You can determine the frequency of it. Let's just say that it's every week, and there's no end date. We get a lot of questions about the no end date. Whenever we have a discharge of a resident, it automatically treats that as an end date. So you don't have to go back in and turn off a scheduled charge if you have a discharge for a particular patient. And then you can decide, are you going to submit it now, or are you going to wait for the first scheduled date? And so if we wanted to start this next Monday, we could set that up, and then we approve that schedule, and it'll generate that individual charge as a scheduled charge rather than a standard charge. Okay, just a quick note. I'm not going to go into all of the details of requisitions and transfers, but what I want to show you real quickly is we do have a module that allows you to generate a transfer transfer request in the same way that you do a purchase order. So you'll notice this looks a lot like that purchase order screen. And if I wanted to be able to move a particular item, I can select that item, say that I need 5 of those from Central Supply to my first floor location, and then I can submit that transfer. And what happens is it goes into a queue for generating those for fulfillment. So, for example, I've got that particular item under a particular location. Each one of those are being grouped by that particular location, and they have a different status. So this one has already been fulfilled and is waiting to be received into the facility location. This one is awaiting fulfillment, and this one has an order that was generated for it as a part of the process, meaning they went to fulfill it. It wasn't in stock, so they had to generate an order automatically from that. And so it automatically has those statuses, gives you the ability to have a note for who did what as you go. And then, of course, we can fulfill those. So imagine if you had a larger facility where you had Essential Supply that was servicing 3 buildings, for example, you need to kind of be able to fulfill that particular item and tell the system, hey, I'm going to take it out of Central Supply and move it over to this other location. So we do allow for that. And you can see here, I've selected this item that's ready to fulfill. I click on this fulfill button, and it says, hey, I've got a requested quantity of 5. My on-hand quantity is -3, meaning I don't really have any, but maybe they're actually on the shelf and my quantity on hand is just off. That's obviously possible. And then I can say, hey, I've got all 5 of those and I don't need to order any. Or I could say that I've got 2 of those on the shelf and I need to order 3 of them. So when I fulfill that transfer, it'll automatically queue that up into a waiting to be ordered system. And so you can see this one is partially fulfilled. So when I go to generate my purchase order for that, it'll automatically add those other items on there for me. Okay, so that kind of takes us all the way through the charging and the purchasing side. I want to point out just a few other things about the system, particularly the how to get some help and how we manage that inside of our organization. We have a support section down here. One of the things that we are really great at with our company is the implementation process. We have a customer success team that is designed specifically to help you work through the process of getting onboarded into our system. And we try and target that 80 to 85% range of doing the work for you. In other words, if you've got 6 vendors that you're buying from today, we might already have most of the data from Gordon's, for example, because of our HPS CAT that we use. So we may already have most of that information. We may have most of that from McKesson even. But if you've got other vendors that we need to be able to get loaded for you, we ask you to send us a spend history report for each of those vendors, and a contact. Your sales rep typically is what we ask for. And then we work with them to get all of that data and get it loaded for you ahead of time. Now, we may ask you to do the general ledger code if we're doing accounting integration and those kind of things. But most of that data load and preparation to go live, we're taking care of that for you. If it's a vendor that we don't currently have, we go through the vendor onboarding request process, determine how that vendor prefers to receive an electronic order. Sometimes it's just email. I'll be honest with you, we have a bunch of vendors that just prefer to receive those orders via email. That's okay inside the system. It won't mean any difference to you really, other than you may not get an electronic invoice at the end. But we work with the vendor to optimize that to the best of our ability and their abilities. But you don't have to worry about any of that part of it. Our customer success team takes care of that for you. We typically, in small groups, we typically see a 30-day to 60-day cycle for onboarding from the time you sign an agreement to the time that you go live. For larger organizations, it really depends on the project. We will kind of develop a mini project plan to be able to monitor that process. And we work with the larger organizations to make sure that the timelines are in line with their expectations. And again, that depends on how many vendors. Maybe you want to go live with, just a small number of your accounts first, and then add the other ones as the, pilot or the proof of concept stage is over. Depends really on your organization, what your needs are. But our team will work with you to build that plan and make sure that we stay on target in terms of the timelines and your expectations. Once you're actually onboarded, we also have some things that I wanted to point out. There are training guides already built into the system. So we have quick start guides here, both in PDF and Word format. The Microsoft Word format is available so that you can also make it your own. In other words, we know you have specific workflows inside of your organization that you may need to make customizations to the quick start guides. We give you that source document that we use to create our PDF, and you could just download those and make your own updates to it. We also have video training here for different sections of the software, and those are being constantly updated as well. And then we have some release notes in this section down below, and that gives you the capability to see what our updates are. We're right now on monthly cycles for releasing updates, and we typically have anywhere from 25 to 45 tickets that are associated with that release. So, and most of those are enhancements from customers. So anytime you need help and there's an issue or a modification that would make things easier, we put that into a queue and we actively develop on the software all the time. We also have a help desk section. This will allow you to create a ticket on the fly and submit it to our team. Our team is constantly analyzing and reviewing that, and it makes it available to our team within just a few seconds, and then they'll respond to you and take action appropriately to that. Any of your closed tickets will also show up in this closed tickets tab. We have also just a generic contact us. This allows us to get an email specifically related to your question. And again, that goes into the ticketing queue and gets handled very quickly. A third way for immediate help is to actually send a chat request. So we have an integrated chat with real people on it, no bots, I promise. There are no bots. There's real people in South Carolina where we're located that help you when you type in a question down here in the lower right. And then, of course, we also still allow people to call us. I mean, it's very common for people to need some help with PO Advantage, and we want to be able to support you by answering your questions as well, just on a telephone call. Real quickly, too, just a couple of other sections rounding out this support tab. We have a little section where you can download the mobile apps, and so this is for both the dispense and the ordering app, as well as those scanner setup and configuration screens. So we support two different kinds of fob scanners. This is really a Bluetooth non-corded version of the exact same scanner up here above. These are about the size of a keychain fob for your car. Very easy to use. They can also be hung on a lanyard. We have a lot of particularly in senior living, staff members that just carry them around on their lanyards and use them as they go along throughout the day. And that is a pretty nice way to be able to use that. Both of these operate in memory mode, meaning that you don't have to be tethered in live mode to be able to scan. It'll remember the scans as you go along, and then you can come back and synchronize those scans at the end after you're done. And that is supported both on the dispensing side as well as the ordering and cycle count side of things. Okay, I know we've gone through a lot. We have just a few minutes left to be able to answer some questions. Great question. So Aaron and Jamie ask about integration to point-click care. There are 2 points of integration with point-click care. The first is that we have a resident census integration, and that allows us to pull resident data. You have to actually take action to do that, and there is a fee on the point-click care side for being able to do that. We also have an import file for residents too. If you wanted to be able to maintain them in PO Advantage separately, that is perfectly okay, no problem at all on that side. The other side of that is on the charge tracking side. So we have a ancillary charges export file that is already pre-structured to go to point-click care. Again, that's not direct integration. That's an export and then an import on the point-click care. But that is absolutely available there. Jody asked about the cost associated with that, with the application. So there is a cost associated with it. There's an implementation fee. It typically runs, we kind of determine based on your organization what the implementation fee is going to be. For example, if you have 15 locations and they're all on the same centralized formulary using the same vendors, that's a smaller implementation fee than if you've got 15 locations and they're all doing individual vendors and individual formularies. So that ranges anywhere from $1,000 to $1,500 per physical location. And then we have a license fee per month, which is, again, depending on some of the scenarios of your organization, but typically right at $100 per month per location, which is HPS has negotiated the best deal anywhere for PO Advantage. Yeah, great question from Aaron and Jamie again. The question is there a way to run a year-end inventory with this program? And there is absolutely a report that is doing it by location. So it shows both the minimum and the maximum assigned to each item. It shows the current on-hand quantity by dispensing unit of measure, and it calculates the cost basis for that each's value. And I say each's, I really mean dispensing value. And then it'll show you an inventory total and inventory value for that. And that can be run at any time. The question came in, is there an option to review the program before making a decision? Unfortunately, there's not a good way to be able to provide access to the application without doing a full implementation. That being said, if you want to do a one-on-one in-depth demonstration of the software with the application of what your business use cases are, we're happy to do that. We would love to do that, in fact. We are, I think, one of the things that we're best at is analyzing business processes and how the application can be used inside of your organization. And we can customize a demonstration that is related to that. And feel free to reach out to your HPS sales rep, and they can organize that with me or one of my team members. All right. Well, I appreciate everybody's time taking a few minutes of their day to look at the product, and we're excited about where we are with it and our opportunities that it provides for the HPS membership in particular. As most of you probably know, our relationship with HPS is great, and being able to have access to CAT and some of the data behind there supporting PO Advantage is a huge opportunity, I think, for the membership. So thank you again for your interest and your time today, and hopefully we'll talk to each one of you individually very soon. Thanks a lot.